Doctrine and Covenants, section 128, verse 20. And again, what do we hear? Glad tidings from Cumorah, Moroni, an angel from heaven, declaring fulfillment of the prophets. And then other sacred things happen here in Fayette, Seneca County. The voice of Michael on the banks of the Susquehanna. The voice of Peter, James, and John in the wilderness between Harmony, Susquehanna County, and Colesville, Broome County, on the Susquehanna River, declaring themselves as possessing the keys of the kingdom of the dispensation of the fullness of times. You realize that these are sacred lands that these things have occurred on. And think of how many amazing sacred things have happened right on these lands that are being described here. And of course, then Cumorah is described within these same lands. So it would indicate that the Hill Cumorah is actually the one in New York. Moroni, chapter 6, verse 6, and this is about 400 years A.D., says, And it came to pass that when we had gathered all our people in one to the land Cumorah, behold, I, Mormon, began to be old. Therefore I made this record out of the plates of Nephi, and hid up in the Hill Cumorah all the records, which had been entrusted to me by the hand of the Lord, save it were these few plates which I gave unto my son Moroni. Here we have Mormon saying that he's entrusted all the records to the hill. Now there are at least 8 different accounts of Joseph Smith taking brethren into the Hill Cumorah and seeing literally wagon loads of plates there. There was one account where the individual, many years after having had this experience, wrote and said, whether it was in vision or whether it was in the flesh, I don't know for sure. And so others have taken that and said, well, it must have been a vision, because we know that there was a Hill Cumorah where the Book of Mormon people actually were. But then if the Book of Mormon actually occurred in Central America, then there had to have been a Hill Cumorah there, but then there's this inconvenient hill up in North America in New York. And that is how the two Cumorah theory got started, or why that theory was brought forward, is that the idea that, well, there must have been 2 Cumorahs. One where everything really happened, and then one where the record was actually deposited. But the thing is, that goes contrary to what the Book of Mormon itself claims, because it continually goes back to the same hill. Time and time again, they go back to this same hill because it is a sacred location. It is the sacred repository of their records. Here's Book of Mormon and Ether 15 and 11. Now Moroni is writing this. Listen to how he says this. And it came to pass that the army of Coriantumr did pitch their tents by the hill Ramah. And that's the same hill where my father Mormon did hide up the records unto the Lord, which were sacred. So see, even within the text of the Book of Mormon, it continually goes back to the same hill. There was never any indication at all that the Book of Mormon had more than one Hill Cumorah, because they keep going back time and time again to the same hill. Now, those who have said, well, he hid the records up in the Hill Cumorah, but then later he put the records on the Hill Cumorah. And they think that that is indicating 2 hills. The Hill Cumorah is a glacial drumlin. It's not one that would be susceptible to natural caves or cavities in the hill. So it must have probably been a man-made cavity and then filled with the records. Where did Joseph Smith send missionaries? Unto the Lamanites. Doctrine and Covenants, section 54, verse 8, in June of 1831, the Lord commands Joseph Smith to send missionaries unto the Lamanites. And thus you, Newell Knight, shall take your journey into the regions westward unto the land of Missouri, unto the borders of the Lamanites. Now, I don't believe that the Lord is confused about where the Lamanites are located, and he told Joseph Smith to send the missionaries there. Joseph Smith then also sent missionaries all over. The Book of Mormon had just been published, and a lot of folks have wanted to know, well, what did Joseph Smith know about this geography, and why did we end up with so many people thinking that the Book of Mormon is in Central America? Well, some of the early brethren who were called to preach the gospel began to seek support for the claims of the Book of Mormon about large cities and so forth through a book by John Lloyd Stevens, and it was a New York Times best-selling book called Incidents of Travel in Central America, Caiaphas and Yucatan. This book was a 2-volume series that actually had for the first time engravings of these monumental ruins that are in Central America. and it became a tremendous hit in the United States at the time. This book, this 2-volume series, focused on the tremendous ruins of Central America, which were promoted by early brethren of the church as evidence for an assumed highly advanced civilization. Such grand evidences appeared to be lacking in the northern Native American cultures, who were looked upon as ignorant savages at the time. This is John Taylor and Wilford Woodruff, who were the editors of the Times and Seasons at this time, in an article called Ancient Ruins in 1844. At the time that the book, meaning the Book of Mormon, was translated, there was very little known about ruined cities and dilapidated buildings. The general presumption was that no people possessing more intelligence than our present race of Indians had ever inhabited this continent. And the accounts given in the Book of Mormon concerning large cities and civilized people having inhabited this land was generally disbelieved and pronounced a humbug. David Whitmer, one of the witnesses of the plates, had this to say. This was actually recorded in David Whitmer Interviews, a Restoration Witness by Lyndon W. Cook in 1991. When we meaning the witnesses of the Book of Mormon, were first told to publish our statement, we felt sure that the people would not believe it. For the Book of Mormon told of a people who were refined and dwelt in large cities. But the Lord told us that he would make it known to the people, and people should discover evidence of the truth of what is written in the book. John Taylor writes this. He says, we were then told that the inhabitants of this continent were and always had been a rude, barbarous race, uncouth, unlettered, and without civilization. But when they were told of the various relics that have been found indicative of civilization, intelligence, and learning, when they were told of the wealth, architecture, and splendor of ancient Mexico, when they could trace the fine delineations of the sculptor's chisel on the beautiful statue, the mysterious hieroglyphic, and the unknown character, they began to believe that a wise, powerful, intelligent, and scientific race had inhabited this continent. And I can just see the missionaries as they would go out and preach the gospel and give people the Book of Mormon to read. And they would read about these civilizations, these people who had writing and built large cities. And then they would go to the missionaries and say, wait a minute, are you talking about the savages? And going, well, where's the evidence for that? And so I think what we see here is that we see that the early brethren were very interested in demonstrating this highly advanced civilization that was assumed would be found, who were the Nephite people of the Book of Mormon. This is 1844 in the Times and Seasons. It says, Stevens, in his Incidents of Travel in Central America, has thrown in a flood of testimony, and from the following statements it is evident that the Book of Mormon does not give a more extensive account of large and populous cities than those discoveries now demonstrate to be even in existence. So they were using, the early brethren were using the Incidents of Travel in Central America to demonstrate what the Book of Mormon was thought to be saying about large civilizations. When recent developments proved beyond a doubt that there was ancient ruins in Central America, which in point of magnificence, beauty, strength, and architectural design would vie with any of the most splendid ruins on the Asiatic continent. See, these opinions of these early brethren began a romance with the exotic, almost irresistible notion that has focused the interests and imaginations of generations of Latter-day Saints thousands of miles from where Joseph Smith recovered the ancient record and indicated by his signed statements to have been in North America. Which leads to another very important question. Why would it even be assumed that the Nephites would have built majestic ruins? Dr. Hugh Nibley, this is in the Melchizedek Priesthood Manual of 1957, in an article he wrote called An Approach to the Book of Mormon, Looking for the Wrong Things. Book of Mormon archaeologists have often been disappointed in the past because they have consistently looked for the wrong things. Blinded by the gold of pharaohs and the mighty ruins of Babylon, Book of Mormon students have declared themselves not interested in the drab and commonplace remains of our lowly Indians. But in all the Book of Mormon, we look in vain for anything that promises majestic ruins. why would we even think that we should be looking for majestic ruins? If you think about it for just a second, as I was pondering this, I was going, well, what do we have any precedence for such an idea? Well, if you take a look at the civilization, for example, around the time of Egypt, you have the Egyptians and the Hebrews. Which one of those were God's people? The Hebrews. Which one of them built grand structures? The Egyptians. What about between the Romans and the Jews? Of course, the Jews were God's people, but who built grand structures? The Romans. In fact, if you look back in history, I can't think of any time when God's people were the ones that built grand structures. In fact, quite the opposite has been the case. Nephi writing this is 1 Nephi chapter 12, verse 18. And the large and spacious building which thy father saw is vain imaginations and the pride of the children of men. And of course, this would have been brought with them to the new world. Would righteous Nephites have built such a structure as you see here?